It is time to turn our attention to the issues of law enforcement, public safety, and public engagement in the city of Oakland. I am Regina Jackson, chair of the Oakland Police Commission, and I would like to welcome everyone to the Police Commission's Police Chief Candidate Forum. After the termination of our former police chief, and in a post-George Floyd environment, the Commission sought to change the narrative around the Oakland Police Department and its leadership, specifically the position of Chief of Police. The Commission views the Chief of Police hiring process as a real opportunity to effect significant change here in Oakland. Policing is different than it was 8 years ago, or even 8 months ago, or frankly, even 8 weeks ago. The Commission felt strongly that we needed a Chief of Police that embodied these changing times. The Commission drafted a job description that reflected our desire for a reform-minded Chief of Police that must be able to rebuild trust and nurture legitimacy by actively seeking to modernize the policing model, as well as embrace and advance the principles of procedural justice while still focusing on reducing crime and violent crime. The Commission feels that the next Chief of Police must have a deep and earnest commitment to transforming OPD's culture to embrace guardianship rather than a warrior mindset. The next Chief will promote de-escalation and disengagement tactics and create a less militarized police force. The next Chief must promote deep, structural, institutional reforms and foster a culture of self-examination and constant improvement within the department, including an ability for officers to report misconduct safely. The Chief will be expected to have exceptional communication skills as well as exceptional cultural sensitivity in order to respond to wide-sweeping concerns raised by an informed and engaged public, the mayor, the city council, and the police commission. The commission, through its ad hoc Chief of Police Selection Committee, reviewed and analyzed all of the applications it received for the position. The committee conducted multiple rounds of interviews and had determined that these 4 finalists, who you'll meet this evening, are the very best of the applicant pool. I will ask a series of the finalists to allow the public to get to know them better and to highlight each candidate's thoughts, experience, and readiness for the position. Should any member of the public desire more information about these candidates, we have posted information about each candidate on our Police Commission webpage, along with their answers to specific interview questions. Also, should one desire to provide commentary or endorsements about any individual candidate after this evening, the baton will be passed to the mayor's office, and comments and endorsements should be sent directly to Mayor Schaaf. The mayor will begin her due diligence process and the final selection of Oakland's next Chief of Police in the coming weeks ahead. I want to thank the mayor for her support of this process and for her assistance in this evening's candidates forum. So to you, Mayor Libby Schaaf, thank you very much. And I also want to thank the public for its attendance and its engagement in this process. So without further ado, to you, Libby Schaaf. Mayor Schaaf.
That's all right, Chair Jackson, Regina. This is a historic night. And I know that there is much that we don't know about our nation's future in this moment. But there is something we do know. Oakland voters overwhelmingly approved creating the most independent and powerful citizen police commission. And in this last election, while we have not yet counted all the votes, we know that Measure S1 won with such a large margin that it is absolutely declared victorious. And it has been a pleasure to work in a partnership with this commission. And this is a historic moment for Oakland. This is the very first time in the city's history that the police chief hiring process has been led primarily by this amazing commission. And I want to thank each and every one of you. It is an amazing service that you provide to our community, and this, your most important duty. So with that, I do always give Oaklanders a quick update on what's going on with the city, especially the condition of health in this city, and I will do that before we get to our candidates. Just a reminder that Alameda County remains in the orange tier, and that is an improvement, and we are remaining in that tier, which is good news. In fact, one of our indicators, daily case rates, is actually already in the yellow tier. So we are showing improvement, and we are being rewarded for our vigilance, our wearing our masks, our keeping social distance, and our endless washing of our hands. And as a reminder, many of these activities have been restored to us as of October 20th, including being able to return to our places of worship with a reduced capacity and under safety guidelines, as well as after-school activities for children, gyms, barbershops and personal services, and even limited indoor dining. To see a full list of what is allowed now that we are in the orange tier, please visit acgov.org for all your public health information. Next slide. Quick review. Again, all of the City of Oakland's ballot measures passed with strong margins. Our youth will now be able to vote in their school board races, 16 and 17-year-olds. Our police commission is strengthened. We are revising our fine structure to put in more equity, as well as truly holding people accountable, particularly for illegal dumping. And finally, you passed another school bond to allow us to modernize and improve the conditions of learning for our children. Next slide. You also, a lot of the state results are still somewhat unknown. Things like the stem cell research, the property tax to fund schools and government services, schools and communities first, those are still too close to call. But many of the other ballot measures that Oaklanders were passionate about, I know myself, very disappointed in the results of, for example, Proposition 16. However, we did restore the right to vote for parolees, and we rejected backslide into old criminal justice standards that would have caused over-incarceration, and we are preserving the reforms that were recently enacted. Next slide. And next slide. Just a reminder that we're making wonderful progress in distributing laptops for permanent ownership, as well as additional loaners, as well as free hotspots and internet connections to Oakland school children. To find out more about this amazing effort, you can Google Oakland Undivided. And of course, if you know someone who is in school that needs technical support for distance learning, please be sure to fill out the Tech Check form at OUSD's website. But 47,000 public school students so far have been assisted by Oakland Undivided. Very exciting. Congratulations, community that came together for this. Next slide. And finally, a reminder that we are trying to help everyone get through this pandemic together. The City of Oakland is offering grants to help home-based small businesses get through this economic shutdown. The application deadline is approaching November 9th. You can find out more about this grant and other ways that we are supporting people through grant programs from the City of Oakland at oaklandca.gov/CARES Act. That's my update for this week. I turn it back over to you, Chair Jackson, to introduce the beautiful Oakland community to this very esteemed set of finalists to be the next chief of the Oakland Police Department. Thank you, and congratulations to all four of you for reaching this point in the process. And I want to commend the commission. I believe this is probably the first public forum for finalists of a police chief that I certainly have seen in my 22 years working for the City of Oakland. So again, a historic night, and thank you to each one of you who's making yourself available through this process and to let our community get to know you tonight. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Mayor Shaft. Appreciate it. I want to introduce the ad hoc police commission members, Commissioners Jose Dorado and Brenda Harbin Forte and Edwin Prather. And I would now like to ask Commissioners Jose Dorado and Brenda Harbin Forte to introduce our four finalists.
Jose, unmute.
My apologies. Deputy Chief LaRon Armstrong was born and raised in West Oakland, California, and is a graduate of McClymonds High School. His lived experience within this challenging environment led him to a career in law enforcement to make a difference in his community. He has over 25 years of law enforcement experience and nearly 22 years with the Oakland Police Department and 4 years with the Alameda County Probation Department. Deputy Chief Armstrong has served in several assignments within OPD. He has worked as a community resource officer, criminal investigator, patrol supervisor, gang intelligence task force supervisor, watch commander, commander of the youth and school safety section, commander of the special victims unit, special resource commander, area commander, is currently assigned as the Bureau of Field Operations commanding officer of the Special Operations Division. He holds a bachelor's degree in criminal justice and a master's degree in organizational leadership. He is a graduate of California Post Leadership School, FBI National Academy, Session 261, and the Police Executive Research Forum, Senior Management Institute for Police Executives. Deputy Chief Armstrong resides in Oakland with his wife and 2 daughters. Deputy Chief Armstrong's career has always been inspired by the idea of being part of the change you want to see in OPD.
And next in alphabetical order is Commander Jason Lando. Now in his 21st year of service with the Pittsburgh Bureau of Police, Commander Jason Lando has served as commander since 2014. As the leader of one of Pittsburgh's busiest and most diverse districts, Commander Lando and his team implemented several initiatives geared toward uniting police officers and community members, increasing trust in law enforcement, and reducing violent and quality of life crimes. As commander of the city's Narcotics and Vice Unit, he currently oversees teams of detectives investigating community complaints of drug trafficking, illegal firearms, nuisance bars, and human trafficking. Before becoming commander, he worked a variety of assignments, including patrol, undercover narcotics, as a member of the SWAT team, and as a crisis negotiator. In 2015, Commander Lando and several fellow officers designed and implemented a procedural justice training program for the Bureau of Police. The 3-year training program for over 1,000 police officers covered topics including procedural justice, de-escalation, and implicit bias. In 2017, the team designed a community-facing version of the training, providing classes for the public in churches and community centers across Allegheny County. He holds a bachelor's degree in emergency medicine from the University of Pittsburgh and a master's degree in legal studies from California University of Pennsylvania. When he's not working, he volunteers as a big brother to 12-year-old Jaden as part of Big Brothers Big Sisters Bigs in Blue program.
Deputy Chief Drennan Lindsay is a mother, wife, teacher, and student who was born in Oakland, California, and raised in Richmond, California. Deputy Chief Lindsay overcame many challenges in her life as a single mother who raised her son Dominique while she attended school full-time and worked nights at UPS. After she completed her bachelor's degree, she began her career in Oakland as a middle school teacher at Elmhurst. She later joined the Oakland Police Department in 1998. Deputy Chief Lindsay worked very hard to rise to the rank of interim deputy chief, working a variety of assignments and supporting the community. She is currently in charge of the Bureau of Investigations. She is married and has helped raise 5 beautiful and smart children who are now adults. Deputy Chief Lindsay is currently a 3rd-year doctoral student at St. Mary's College and a part-time instructor at Merritt College, Administration of Justice program. She has been a lifetime educator and learner with a desire to try and learn new things, such as Bikram yoga and meditation. Deputy Chief Lindsay has a love for people, her family, and this community. She has been committed and dedicated for over 2 decades as a public servant to the city of Oakland with gratitude and enthusiasm.
And finally, again, all in alphabetical order, Chief Abdul Pridgen. He served as chief of the Seaside Police Department since 2018. He's made accountability, transparency, and winning the community's trust a department priority. He's put systems in place to increase the public's confidence in police and assure that policing for safety, not incarceration, is each officer's focus. Even in a time when the country is gaining greater awareness of policing's role in perpetuating historical inequities, Seaside's Black community has increased its trust in their police under Chief Pridgen's tenure. Before coming to Seaside, Chief Pridgen served as the first Black assistant chief of the Fort Worth Police Department. Chief Pridgeon holds a Master of Arts in Public Administration and a Bachelor of Science in Criminal Justice. He's a graduate of the Southern Police Institute, FBI National Academy, FBI National Executive Institute, and Harvard Kennedy School, where he received an executive certificate in public leadership. Before becoming a police officer, Chief Pridgeon was a member of the Armed Services serving in Desert Storm. He grew up in the Bronx and is a proud husband and father. He's always had a servant's heart and a commitment to addressing problems with both a practical eye and through the lens of social justice. In what little spare time he has, he enjoys volunteering and spending quality time with his family. Madam Chair, back to you.
Excellent. Thank you so very much, both Commissioners Jose Dorado and Brenda Harbin-Forte, for those introductions. So now we will turn to what we've been waiting for, which is the question and answer part. So the first question is, what have you done to prepare yourself to be Oakland's police chief? I will give you each 2 minutes to respond. I'll go in alphabetical order this time, starting with Deputy Chief Armstrong, then to Commander Lando, then to Deputy Chief Lindsay, and finally to Chief Pridgeon. And if we can start that clock, Deputy Chief Armstrong, to you.
Good evening, Chair. I've been preparing for this moment for a very long time. To be someone born and raised in Oakland, when I grew up, being a police officer didn't even seem like a possibility. Based on me not experiencing a positive interaction with police officers and not seeing police officers that look like me. But when tragedy hit in my own family with the death of my brother, I knew if I wanted to be a part of my community's safety, I would have to be a part of the change I wanted to see. So it is truly an honor to even be considered as the next Chief of Police for the city of Oakland. I've dedicated 26 years to serving the residents of Oakland, 4 years with the Alameda County Probation Department, and nearly 22 years with the Oakland Police Department. I bring a broad breadth of experience with me. I've worked in multiple assignments within the OPD, and I've been a thought leader within the department. I've worked as a patrol officer and supervisor, a community resource officer, a criminal investigator, been in the gang task force, been a patrol watch commander, been over youth and school services, been a special resource commander, a special victims commander, an area commander, and now I'm the commanding officer as the Deputy Chief of Police for BFO2 East. I've invested myself in my education as well. I hold a bachelor's degree in criminal justice and a master's degree in organizational leadership. I'm a graduate of the nationally acclaimed Perth Senior Management Institute for Executives. I'm also a graduate of the California Post Leadership School and the FBI National Academy. I have tirelessly worked in the community to build trust and build a relationship between OPD and the community, something that did not exist when I grew up in West Oakland. I've partnered with the community to make Oakland a safer place to live through our ceasefire strategy, which has helped to achieve consistent decreases in shootings and homicides. I've established strong partnerships across the city with community-based organizations, clergy, churches, and NCPC groups. I've also had the importance of building relationships with the next generation of Oaklanders by working with the Youth Advisory Commission, the Hidden Genius Program, and other programs throughout the city. Being the next Chief of Police in Oakland is personal for me. I'm a native son, born and raised in West Oakland, and I currently live in East Oakland with my family. The safety of Oakland community matters to me. I'm personally invested. My family is invested, and I'm known across this city for making time to support anything that improves Oakland, because
Thanks,
this is my home.
Oh, I'm sorry. You had 15 seconds left? Okay, my apologies. We're going to get better about this. So next up, we need to hear from Jason Lando. Thank you so much, Deputy Armstrong.
Thank you so much, Chair Jackson, and thank you to the community for having me here tonight. So just a little bit about me. Like it was said in my introduction, I come from the Pittsburgh Bureau of Police in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Been a Pittsburgh police officer for 20 years. I've been very lucky to have a pretty amazing career. Born and raised in Pittsburgh. I was hired in the Pittsburgh Bureau of Police during the consent decree, so I have a lot of experience with working under civilian oversight. I think one thing I bring to the table is that I'm a very well-rounded leader. I think that's really important in policing and something that we often miss. A lot of times we see that our officers or our leaders are very strong in, law and order type activity or just focus on the community engagement. And I think it's really important as a leader and as a chief of police to be well-rounded and well-versed in all those things. So as you heard in the introduction, I have experience in patrol. I worked undercover in narcotics. I was on the SWAT team. But then as I matured and progressed in my career, I started to take more of a leadership track rather than investigative track. And I was one of the original founding members of the Pittsburgh Police Procedural Justice Unit. As part of that initiative, we started a 3-year training program where we brought procedural justice, de-escalation training, and implicit bias training to our entire department. After that, we created a community-facing version of the training because we really thought it was important to interact with the community and to really be transparent about what we were teaching our officers. Through doing that training, we were able to bring police officers and citizens closer together and establish some really long-lasting relationships rooted in trust. I have a lot of experience working with diverse communities. I inherited a police station that was at a high level of mistrust in the police, low community outreach and engagement, and really low morale. So I spent 5 years working in Pittsburgh Zone 5 station to really change that dynamic. We built some youth.
Hello, I can't hear Commander Landau. Okay, can you go ahead and finish up your statement? I think you got muted somehow.
I'm sorry, yeah, and I just wanted to say that that's the same, while the styles are different, I think the philosophies are the same, and that's the same philosophy that I would bring with me to Oakland.
Thank you very much. Deputy Chief Lindsay?
Good evening. So, being a person that was born and raised in Oakland and Richmond, I've been preparing for this opportunity all of my life. To me, policing is more than just wearing a badge and having a gun. Growing up, I was raised by a single mother. I was a teenage mother myself, where I had to raise my son while putting myself through college, working long nights, and learning how to overcome obstacles at a very young age. And so as I began my career here at the Oakland Police Department, I found out that not only were my experiences as going through the academy and doing something that I completely had no idea that I would ever end up doing would be so fulfilling, but it also taught me a lot about just growth, learning, and continuing to invest in myself. I invested in myself through education, just getting a lot of experience through the Oakland Police Department, through operational experience. I worked in patrol. I worked in one of the original community policing units as a young officer. I was a sergeant in patrol. I was a watch commander, an area commander, and I had a myriad of experience as a crowd control manager, whether it was through an incident commander or being on the front line as an officer. I have a wealth of investigative experience. I've worked every single investigative unit, ranging from burglary all the way up to homicide, in which I am currently the Bureau of Investigations chief today. I have a wealth of administrative experience. I've been the personnel and training commander, have assisted this department with just wonderful ideas and creativity, where we were able to increase hiring a diverse community, hiring people from Oakland, developing meaningful relationships with people from the community that are still relevant today, women from, mothers who were victims of, their children were victims of homicide, the 1,000 Mothers program, and all while just balancing family and career and having time to raise my children and also take care of my grandmother, mother, and my husband. So overall,
Thank you. This has been a little rough getting to our positions. So what we are doing is giving 30 second, then 15 second, and then time, and then we mute. So forgive me for how rough it's been. Now to you, Chief Pridgeon.
Thank you, Chair Jackson. And so aside from watching enough recorded Zoom meetings to last me a lifetime, I've spoken to enough professionals in the industry to come to some understanding of what might be required for Oakland to be from under the negotiated settlement agreement. Aside from that, I spent approximately 8 years as a number 2 in Fort Worth, Texas, and sometimes served as the acting chief of police. Fort Worth is a city that is larger in population than San Francisco and 7 times the geographical size. I have introduced evidence-based and community-involved strategies to reduce community harm and improve community safety. I have learned the difference between outputs, which is checking boxes, and outcomes, which is community safety. I'm also an experienced chief, so I know that the buck cannot get passed to someone else who might have a sphere of influence or their expertise is narrower. I'm responsible and accountable for everything that happens in the police department. I embrace that. I'm also familiar with how to transform organizational culture because I've done it. I also believe that the scope and substance of my experience and my leadership will serve Oakland well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So the second question is, please discuss successes you have achieved in your career in preventing and reducing crime. You each have 2 minutes, and I'll start with Commander Landau, then go to Deputy Chief Lindsay, then to Chief Pridgeon, and finally to Deputy Chief Armstrong.
Thank you. So when I inherited the Zone 5 police station, we had a significant crime problem, but I'd like to just discuss one of the neighborhoods where we saw great success. It's an area called East Liberty, and it was a once thriving area that had saw some economic decline, and the Chamber of Commerce and local businesses were trying really hard to bring the organization. They were trying to bring the community back. So I met with the Chamber of Commerce to come up with a strategy, a plan. I had in my mind an idea of what would work, but I've come to realize over my years in policing that you can't do it without the community input. So together with business owners, residents, and the Chamber of Commerce, we developed a strategy that involved officers on bikes, walking beats, regular meetings with our Chamber of Commerce and our local leaders. Within a year's time, we were able to clean up the community. A hotel came to the neighborhood, several businesses opened. We were able to drive down crime, particularly violent crime and nuisance crime in the area. And the residents and the businesses and the Chamber of Commerce reported a complete and total change in that area. And because of that, the area is now thriving. And the businesses and the hotel continue to work with us on a regular basis to ensure it stays that way. So I use that example because I think a lot of times we as the police want to go into an area and kind of do what we think is best, and it just can't be done without the partnerships in the community. And for me, that was, I think, one of our biggest success stories, was being able to revitalize that neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. DC Lindsay?
So being able to to prevent and reduce crime requires several things: intentional operational strategies, robust investigations, and community outreach. And so one example that I would like to give is when I was the area commander for District 2, and there was a very increase in violent crime as well as property crimes. And so some of the strategies that I employed, not only utilizing statistical data, crime statistics, the help of the Criminal Investigation Division, working with the other internal law enforcement partners, but also working with external partners, working and partnering with the community, and utilizing just various methodologies so that we could really focus on what was driving the crime up. And so, for example, with our burglary problem, what I did is utilize the crime data to identify the days and times of the week for certain locations where we saw the most uptick in the burglaries. And so what I was finding with some of the newer businesses that were coming into the area, particularly around the happy hour time, which was from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m., we were seeing a surge in not only the businesses being burglarized, but the vehicles being burglarized. So when we were able to be very intentional with, adding additional police officers there, utilizing walking officers in that location, we did begin to see decreases in the crimes along those areas. So that's just one example of just how you can use crime-related data, crime statistics, and the input from community to assist us with having that laser focus, that precision-based policing to identify the crime trends and subsequently come up with strategies to reduce crime. So we were able to reduce crime by 70%.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chief Pridgen.
Thank you, Chair. So first and foremost, we must understand what the problem is, and that's not presuming what we think the community needs. That means involving the community in the conversation about how to resolve crime issues. As we know, crime harms communities, but sometimes intervention strategies harm communities as well. So we need to make sure that our activity matches our understanding of what the problem is in order to reduce harm. I have implemented evidence-based, intelligence-led, and community-focused strategies to ensure that our activity married up with what the community expected of us. So unfortunately in Seaside, we don't have the benefit of a great deal of technology, but what we do have is we can leverage the community trust that we have earned. And also task force, the Blue Ribbon Task Force, that really is a consortium of community members that get together every month to talk about community issues, how to resolve them, and also how to reduce harm in the process. So as a result of our strategies that are really focused on the people in the communities that are committing the violence and not the communities they come from, we were able to reduce violent crime by 14%, reduce use of force by 30%, and reduce arrests by 18%. So crime reduction and community harm reduction are not mutually exclusive, and I have achieved that level of success in Seaside.
Thank you very much. Deputy Chief Armstrong?
Yes, crime prevention and crime reduction is something that I have an enormous amount of experience with. I've been the co-chair of our ceasefire steering committee for several years. And if you know anything about our ceasefire, our evidence-based strategy on reducing gun violence has been successful for the last 5 years and really has been the foundation of the crime reduction in the city of Oakland. But really, it's not about just law enforcement. It's about community. What I've really done is been able to bring community to the table and let them be a part of that decision-making process. Really, crime reduction comes down to prevention, intervention, and enforcement, and then collaboration. And so over the last 3 years in East Oakland in particular, an area that has always seen high levels of violence, we've been able to drive violence down each of the last 3 years. And that's been because of the intentionality behind our strategies, being focused, making sure that we limit the people that we stop in our community, right? Being understanding of the potential harm and impact we can cause by making excessive numbers of stops. And so what we've done here is not only try to save lives, but we've also provided resources and support to those that wanted to make differences in their lives. And we did that through direct communication and partnerships, not only with community, but also with our city agencies. Our Department of Violence Prevention has been critical in being able to provide support to those that are in need. And so we at the Oakland Police Department, our foundation is our community support. Our value for life is in the sanctity of life is at the forefront of everything we do. Our partnerships, both at the federal and state level, have been critical. We currently are one of the few departments in the country that has an actual CJIC, which helps us analyze guns and recover guns and identify those that are bringing weapons into our community. So I've had a lot of success of working with community, but also external partners and local partners and community members. And so that will continue to lead the Oakland Police Department as the foundation of transparency and not being law enforcement led, realizing that.
I'm sorry. Thank you very much. I don't want you to get muted. Thank you very much. We'll move on to the next question. I'm trying to signal folks. Again, what we're going to do is in the chat, give you 30 seconds left, 15 seconds left, then time is up, and have you wrap up before we mute. So the third question is, what is the role of the community in the daily operations of the police department? Should the community have opportunities to provide input? Should the community play a consultative role? You again have 2 minutes, and this time I'll start with Deputy Chief Lindsay, then Chief Pridgen, then to Deputy Chief Armstrong, and finally to Commander Lando. Deputy Chief.
Thank you. So yes, the community plays a huge role in giving input in how we police the community. It's very important that we understand how the community sees the police department and how they see themselves being policed within their own community. They're people who live in a community, to include our business owners. They are present 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And so there are things that they will know and understand that we're not able to know and understand. So in order for us to better serve them, we need to be able to communicate with them and receive the information that's necessary to help them better police their community. I like to provide an example as when I was an area commander and how I was able to have a lot of success, which is how I was communicating with our neighborhood leader council and ensuring that there was priorities established by each one of those leaders for each one of those community policing beats, where I was soliciting information specific to not only crime trends related to violence or burglaries or other entities, but also, blight, vehicles that needed to be towed that have been there for ages, environmental issues that may have been contributing to the crime trends that was happening in the neighborhood. And so what I would do is I would meet with them frequently, identify what those priorities were, ensure that there was a quick follow-up and follow through. And what I found is that because we were very intentional with following up, listening to our community, and providing the type of service that was being asked of us, there was a lot more satisfaction from the community. So I absolutely agree that we have to continue to engage our community, receive information and input from the community, and respond to the things that we're being asked of from the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Chief Pridgen?
Thank you, Chair Jackson. The community absolutely must have a seat at the table. If we want to build trust and legitimacy, their voice needs to be incorporated in the way we respond to community concerns. In Fort Worth, I created the Policy Advisory Committee, where we had members of the community engage the police department on policies that impacted the community. And we didn't just get the people who had favorable opinions of the police, but those who didn't, because oftentimes they provided greater insight and problem solving so that we could reduce harm to our community members. In Seaside, the way officers respond to calls for service is basically from a guardian and community caretaker perspective. So we look at how we can address the underlying issues that give rise to crime. And so what we do is we leverage the Seaside Youth Resource Center that has a wealth of resources to intervene in issues regarding youth problematic behavior, and also the Blue Ribbon Task Force that I talked about with community stakeholders to implement harm-reducing measures. One of the things that we are most proud of in Seaside is, as a result of this type of approach, we have doubled the number of youth diversions and referrals. So to put that another way, that's 2 times as many people that would have been in the criminal justice system that are not, as a result of the way we approach problem solving in the community. We also created opportunities for community members to have a voice in who gets promoted to positions in the department, who gets assigned to specialized assignments, and we're in the process of incorporating them into the hiring process, but the pandemic put a kibosh on that. So that's what we're doing in Seaside.
Thank you very much. So, DC Armstrong, you're next.
Yes, community definitely has a key role in the department's operations. Over the last 2 years, I've been working closely with the Oakland Police Commission. We've worked collaboratively on the creation of several of the most progressive policies in the country. One of which I co-chair with Commissioner Janelle Harris is our use of force policy, That use of force policy not only was vetted by the ACLU, but local organizations within the community. We've also worked on several other policies, which include our carotid and positional asphyxia policy. The ability to come to the table with community was something that we initially were apprehensive about. The idea that law enforcement would be willing to have discussion with community about policies that truly impact officer safety was something new for us. But it was an experience that all of us enjoyed and appreciated because we came together collaboratively and understood what the community values were. That paid tremendous dividends in the creation of the policy that we currently have, and that was approved unanimously. I also have worked closely with our community advisory committees, our neighborhood crime prevention councils. They play a huge role in community policing in the city of Oakland. Problem solving, beginning to understand that community can solve problems as well. So really trying to invest in community to allow them to solve problems at the block level, really enhancing their ability to have access to their community policing officer has been critical. If selected as the chief of police, in my strategic plan within the first 100 days, I would have community as a part of a focus group to develop the department's mission, vision, and goals and metrics for success for the department. As we sit today, the department does not have true goals. And I think when we begin to move forward, it will take community to be at the table to let us know what's important to them so they can help us set our goals as we move forward. Making sure that the department's values are aligned with the community's values and making sure that we're truly transparent with our community.
Thank you very much. Finally, to Commander Lando.
Thank you. So in the 1800s, there was this guy named Sir Robert Peel, and he was the father of modern day policing. And he came up with what were called the 9 Peelian principles, which still apply today. And probably the most important one was the idea that the police are the public and the public are the police. And that's something I always keep in the back of my head. Basically, what he was saying is that the only difference between the police and the public is we're the ones that get paid to do our job. But we're all in this together. So in other words, we cannot be successful if we police in a vacuum. And I think that's kind of where we gotten ourselves into a little bit of trouble in policing nowadays, where we tend to go out and impose our will on the community rather than policing in partnership with them. So when I took over Zone 5 Police Station, one of the first things I did to start building those relationships rooted in trust was to develop what came to be known as the Commander's Cabinet of Community Members. And it was basically a cross-section of all 13 neighborhoods in the district. We included community leaders, block watch captains, faith leaders, school leaders, teachers. We included youth, which I think a lot of times the youth are the ones that are left out, local activists and elected officials. And we would bring everyone together on a monthly basis. We'd all get together, we'd have dinner, which I think is really important, right? You get to know each other better. And then after that, we would go around the table and we'd kind of take the pulse of what was going on in everyone's communities and everyone's spaces that they operated in. And it was just a great way for us to be able to keep our finger on the pulse of what was going on in the neighborhoods. And through that, we were able to solve a lot of problems together. And when large incidents occurred, critical incidents occurred, this group was able to come together and problem solve as a team. And that's the same philosophy I bring to Oakland with me.
Thank you very much. So the next question is, how have you built trust with diverse, historically underserved communities who have borne the brunt of police mistreatment? Some of you may be repeating some messages because you anticipated. But you each have 2 minutes, and I'll start with Chief Pridgeon, then go to Deputy Chief Armstrong, then to Commander Lando, and finally to Deputy Chief Lindsay. Chief Pridgeon?
Thank you, Chair Jackson. It begins with building trust within the agency, and that starts with me. I once heard someone say, before people decide what they think of your message, they decide what they think of you. So I lead by being open, honest, accountable, accessible, and transparent, because I want that replicated when officers go out and deal with the community. What's also important is that procedural justice principles undergird what we do within the organization, because research supports that procedurally just agencies have employees who model that behavior when they interact with the public. In Seaside, one of the things we also have done to build trust is myriad ways of engaging the community in different ways. You know, we have the traditional coffee with a cop. We put a twist on it and had party with a cop with a 70s theme. And the taco about it with the taco truck was probably the best. People love those tacos. But there are opportunities to engage the community in different settings where they're non-enforcement settings, where we build relationships and we see one another as human beings. And not just that, but it's an opportunity to really understand what problems are happening in certain communities and be able to resolve them, and that builds trust. And I will say, since the beginning of this year, starting the first quarter, and keep in mind, this includes the time of the unrest across the country as a result of the George Floyd murder, to the third quarter of this year, trust among Black residents in Seaside has increased 18%. And I'm really proud of the way that the officers are out in the community and developing trust and solving problems and not looking at the criminal justice system as a solution to community issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Chief Armstrong.
Yes, Chair. Being someone born and raised in this underserved community, I grew up with this juxtaposition where I didn't trust police, but violence in my community was something that I saw far too often. Then it touched my own family when my brother was killed. It was the reason I joined the Oakland Police Department, because I wanted to be a bridge between the community and the police department and build a relationship that I didn't see existed, to help ensure that every person in the city of Oakland, despite where they live, feel like they're safe in their own communities, one where people wouldn't have to worry about community violence or even police violence. Every community must be policed in a fair and just and constitutional manner. Building trust is something important that I believe the next chief of police needs to have a trust building strategy. And they must lead that trust building strategy themselves by modeling what they expect. I believe one of the most important traits of a good police officer is their compassion for the community. This idea led me to work with Interim Chief Susan Manheimer on creating our OPD Cares initiative. During a global pandemic of COVID-19, we've seen huge increases in violent crime, and we believe the need was to collaborate with the community to address these public safety issues. But instead of just focusing in on arresting people, we focused in on how we could provide support. And that came through distributing PPE. What I did was procure all of the surplus that OPD had and provided that to the community. Going out into the community, provide masks and sanitizers was really helpful during a difficult time. We've also deployed community resource vehicles throughout East Oakland to provide a presence in East Oakland where needed. One of the programs I look forward to creating is a circle of engagement where community members and officers have tough conversations about their experiences, creating safe spaces where honest, respectful dialogue can be had without judgment. This is about reconciliation. OPD needs to apologize for the negative impact it's had on the community and seek to understand from community what it's going to take to gain their trust back.
Thank you. Commander Lando.
Thank you. So in order to build trust, I like to really adhere to the 4 principles of procedural justice. It's something I've taught to the department, taught to communities, and it resonates with me every day. Those 4 pillars are voice, neutrality, respect, and transparency. I think when we lead and we police with those 4 pillars in mind, that we'll always be successful. When we talk about community engagement, it's so important that we engage with our communities, but it has to be meaningful. It can't be some of these check the box initiatives that we do. One of my colleagues brought up Coffee with the Cop, and I think Coffee with the Cop is great in some communities, right? But if you're, we'll be honest, if you're a 16-year-old black male and you have a deep-seated mistrust of the police, the last thing you want to do is go hang out at Starbucks and drink with a police officer in uniform. It's important that we engage with our youth, but we have to do it in a way that's authentic and that's meaningful and that they want to engage with us. So one of the things that I did was I built a youth engagement program in Pittsburgh. We piloted it at 2 schools in my district. It was called Youth Connections. And we did small group meetings with these young people. We went in, did not wear uniforms. We brought food with us, and we had really honest and open conversations with these young people. Some of these kids had been arrested before. Some of them were struggling in school. Some of them, we'd arrested their parents and we put their parents in jail. So as you can imagine, some of these conversations were very difficult. But through these meaningful conversations, we built incredible relationships with these kids that translated to smoother interactions out on the street. And I just think it was one of the best programs that we built. And it's something I would love to see in Oakland.
Thank you. And DC Lindsay.
Thank you. So being who I am, I sit at the intersection of being both Black and a woman. And as a former teacher in East Oakland, I saw firsthand how those young kids did not trust the police. They saw the police as an occupying force. And so now that I'm a part of the police department, the police force, it is a part of my job and my responsibility to begin to change that perception and change that fear that the community has of the police and get us to a place where people are open, they accept us, and they begin to trust us as being able to care for their city, the community, as they deserve it to be cared for. My vision is that our community members, particularly those who live in oppression, should view the police as a resource and not an occupying force. I realize that community policing is not just about having a unit or a squad, but community policing should be a part of the organization's service delivery philosophy. Everything we do under my leadership would be rooted in the community policing model. Community policing requires intentionality to address these changes. It is personal for me because I live in this community, my family lives in this community, my friends and my daughters drive up and down the street of this community. And so I take it personal with how my daughters look at this police department, how my friends, how my family see this police department. And I'm always wondering, what are some of the things that we can do to change that perception? One of the things I did do that was very successful is I had incorporated lunch with a cop. And that was an opportunity where I partnered with faith-based community members and my special resource officers, and they had to sit down with someone they did not know and break bread with them. And one of the things that the pastor said that I remember registered in the hearts and mind of my officers is how he needed them to be safe so that they can keep him safe. And I could begin to see that change just based on those types of positive interactions between the community and our police department.
Thank you. So, as you know, Oakland has been subject to a negotiated settlement agreement for the past 17 years. What will you do as chief to bring us into full compliance with the requirements of the NSA? And how soon will you be in full compliance under your leadership? Now, this is a big question, so we're going to increase and give everybody 3 minutes to respond. I will start with you, Deputy Chief Armstrong, then Commander Lando, then to Deputy Chief Lindsay, and then to Chief Pridgeon. DC Armstrong?
Yes. As your chief of police, NSA compliance will be one of the highest priorities. 17 years is far too long, and I understand the public's frustration. I also understand all areas where the department has fallen short of compliance and what it's going to take for us to reach full compliance. I have a plan to put the department in full compliance with the 8 open tasks by September 2021. We will then start the 1 year of sustainability. Currently, we are making great strides towards compliance. 5 of the 8 open tasks are in partial compliance. And with focused oversight and consistent auditing, I believe our goals are reasonable. We're currently out of compliance in task 2, which is IED timelines. We have been doing exceptional, and we were even recognized by the court for the improvements that we've been making. We expect that we'll be in compliance with this task by February of 2021. Task 30, our executive review boards. The department was in compliance with this task for many years, and we were taken out of compliance in 2020. Our compliance reports have shown improvements in our executive review boards, and we feel confident with several review boards coming up in 2021 that we will reach full compliance. Task 5, complaint procedures. We've been working closely with our IMT regarding our complaint investigations. Over the last several reports, the IMT has actually supported the department's findings and found that the department was making a lot of headways. And so I feel confident that we will come into compliance with task 5. Tasks 24 and 25 are related to use of force. Like I mentioned earlier, we've just rewritten our use of force policy. We have now the strongest use of force policy in the country. I'm confident that with this strong policy and with the police commission's oversight, we will continue to demonstrate to the court and to the IMT that we are in compliance with tasks 24 and 25. Task 34, our vehicle stops, our stop data. We have the most advanced stop data program in the country, which I lead. We collect more data than the state actually requires, and we do the most thorough analysis in the country. We just recently released our new, what we call slalom dashboards, which is an algorithm that continuously monitors our officer stops and activities. Our last task is task 41, which is currently in compliance but deferred. And that really focuses around our vision system, our risk management system that audits our officers' performance. The department was recognized by the judge in September for the positive momentum that the department has been making. If I'm selected as the chief, I will create a Bureau of Accountability to oversee NSA compliance and to ensure that we are producing monthly reports, not only to the mayor, to the city administrator, but also to the police commission, to display to the public that this department is making the necessary strides to come into compliance with the NSA by September 2021.
Thank you. Commander Lando.
Thank you. So first and foremost, I think it would be really important for me to establish a really strong working relationship with the independent monitor, so I understand exactly what their expectations are, and we can keep in close communication so we can make sure we're achieving those steps towards compliance. After that, in gaining a greater understanding of exactly where we're falling short, I would establish an Office of Strategic Initiatives and Risk Management that would be overseen by a high-level police official, either a captain or a deputy chief. And basically what that office would entail would be to cut the red tape and push forward a number of important initiatives that the department has been trying to put into place. But first and foremost, the most important thing, obviously, would be to come into compliance with the negotiated settlement. The reason I would want this unit to be headed by a captain or a deputy chief is for accountability. I think a lot of times that's where we fail in policing, is that we fail to hold ourselves accountable and those underneath us. So that's one thing I think would be very important, is to really have a unit specifically devoted, basically officers that would be working full-time towards accomplishing that mission of becoming in full compliance. I believe that within 1 year would be a reasonable time frame. And the other thing that I would like to do is, when I talk about the 4 pillars of procedural justice, that last one is transparency. I believe that it would be important that each step along the way that we are releasing a product to the public to show them how we are coming along in our compliance. And then after we gain full compliance, to continue to release reports to the public. It doesn't have to be anything long or complicated, but something that we can put on our website, the Oakland Police website, where the community can go and see how we're doing once we come into full compliance, to make sure that we stay there. So those are just some of the things some of the ideas that I have as far as bringing us into compliance. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Chief Lindsay.
Good evening. So 17 years is too long. And like my peer just iterated, we do have 8 tasks left to get into compliance, 5 are partial and partial compliance. And so I do believe that 12 months or less is a reasonable amount of time to get us into compliance. And so as the chief of police, the strategy that I would use to get us into compliance would be intentional strategies that maintain a sense of urgency and a disruption to the status quo. And there are 2 approaches that I would use. So the first one would be a technical fix. And the second one would be the human systems, the people. We need to reach the hearts and minds of the people, get their buy-in so that we can actually get this work done. So for the technical fix, we would need to stand up a Bureau of Risk Management immediately. And I would appoint a deputy chief to oversee the Bureau of Risk Management and provide that person specific goals and expectations related to the tasks that are required to get done. It would be extreme accountability, because in having the sense of urgency that's required to move this department forward and gaining compliance, the accountability would be a must. And we also would need tools to be able to measure our effectiveness. So not only would we come up with recommendations or strategies that says this is how we're going to do task Two, to gain compliance, we need to make sure that it's working and we need to show its effectiveness. And so secondly, transparency would be paramount. We need to be able to show not only the city officials and other internal and external stakeholders what we're doing, but we should be showing the community what we're doing as well, so that we can have their support in trying to reach the finish line. Now, getting to the people, our human systems, we need to get buy-in. The NSA it cannot be this thing. It cannot be their thing. It has to be our thing. Everybody should show a type of accountability, some type of ownership of what it is that each and every single individual that work within this Oakland Police Department, whether they're a dispatcher or whether they're a captain of police, everyone should know what their role is in getting us into compliance. So therefore, we need the buy-in from the rank and file. Is very important. We cannot do it without the people. We need to educate. We need to have bottom-up feedback, solicit their ideas. There may be some additional ideas that is floating out there where there's some things that we can do better, but we need to have the people behind this negotiated settlement agreement to reach the finish line. And lastly, just utilizing, going back to the timeline for compliance, there should be consistent and incremental 30-day assessments of how we are doing with compliance. So it should be tracked and it should be able to be viewable for those who are also stakeholders in this as well.
Thank you. Chief Pridgeon.
Thank you, Chair Jackson. So it certainly would not be business as usual. And coming from the outside, having worked in two organizations, one large and one small in two different states, I bring a unique perspective. And maybe there are some questions that haven't been asked that I would ask, and maybe there are some things that could be done that I would see. But what I'll say is I have been the commander over internal affairs. And where I came from, every single investigation had to be done within 180 days, and it was. So I'm not sure why OPD is not getting them done within 180 days. The other thing is I have been responsible for implementing audit systems in Fort Worth that were successful. At the end of the day, people need to be held accountable. So I would have to know a few things right off the bat. Who do I have and who do I need? What do I have and what do I need? And not to be presumptuous, but just being real, I would probably need some outside expertise to come in to facilitate this transformation so that we could get out from under the NSA. And let me be even clearer. It's not just completing the tasks, it's outperforming the negotiated settlement agreement. And one of the things that I would do is create a new bureau, and it would be the Ethical and Effective Policing Bureau. And I'll just mention two key components of that bureau. One would be the Ethical and Precision Policing Unit, and it's the former Crime Analysis Unit. Yes, they'll use intelligence-led and evidence-based information, but more importantly, it will be community-informed to make sure that our tactics and strategies do not cause harm to the community and solve crime and build trust in the process. The other thing is the OIG, it would be expanded. There would be audits every single week for every single unit. And more importantly, every single day, there would be progress tracked on where we are with the NSA. There is no more room for error. 17 years is far too long. And there would be a dashboard set up so at any given point in time, anybody could look at the dashboard and see where we are. And every single audit that was done would be released to the public so they would know where we are and where we need to go. Within the first 60 to 90 days, I would ensure that every single system within the police department is aligned with outperforming the negotiated settlement agreement. And there's no doubt in my mind that we would be out from under that negotiated settlement agreement inside of 12 months. And I think that is the crux of my response.
Thank you very much. So this portion of questions are uniquely designed for the individuals that they are put to. So this question is for Commander Lando. In your role as commander with the Pittsburgh Police Department, what specifically have you done to bridge the gap between the police department and those who live in underserved or marginalized communities?
Thank you. So, as I stated earlier, you know, when I inherited the Zone 5 police station, it was rough. It was a really tense atmosphere. Officers didn't feel supported. The community didn't feel supported. There were a lot of protests between, against the police, a lot of, it's just a rough atmosphere. And so I spoke about the commander's cabinet that we put together. And I really used those respected community members to help guide my decision-making and some of the programming that we put together. As I also touched on earlier, one of the things that I'm absolutely the most proud of is the Youth Connections program that we built. The relationships that our officers established with the young people, I just think it was really transformative. The way some of these officers changed how they saw youth in the streets, and the young people in the streets would see our officers on calls, on traffic stops, and instead of having there be that tension there, they knew the officers' names. The officers would come back to the station and say, "Hey, you remember that young person that we hung out with last week in that school event? I went to their house for a domestic, and as soon as they saw me, they calmed down and they cooperated." And so the officers are using less force. The young people feel like they're being policed in a more procedural, just manner. So that's really one of the things I'm most proud of. Some of the other things that we did to build relationships was we designed an open house. Every year at the police station, we opened our station up, and we brought the community down because people were afraid to come to the police station. So we wanted it to be an inviting atmosphere. The first year we did this, we had about 200 or 300 people. By the fifth year, before I was transferred out to my next duty location, we had 2,000 people. We had to have city buses bringing people down to the police station. Local businesses contributed food and prizes, and it's now become a really big, it's like a big event in the community. But that just shows how much trust that we were able to build. Some of the other things that we would do after a high profile incident, we would bring the commander's cabinet together, and we would allow cabinet members to invite someone with them, and we would do education. We'd bring the SWAT team in, and they would talk about their role in the community to reduce fear. And I think one of the best things we were able to do following a shooting, an officer-involved shooting, is we brought the community in and allowed them to go through shoot, don't shoot scenarios. And they saw sometimes the split-second decisions that our officers had to make. And then the last thing is we did post-incident debriefs, so we could really increase our transparency with the community. And I see I'm getting my signal to wrap it up. So those are just some of the things that I think really helped us build those relationships. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So again, this is a singular, unique question for the next person, and that person is Deputy Chief Lindsay. How have your personal experiences influenced your ability to persevere in your law enforcement career? And again, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. So my journey was not a fairy tale beginning. Growing up, my mom was very strict and ensured that I had to earn everything that I got. As a young person, I didn't understand why my life couldn't be easier. Why did I have to work an entire summer to pay for my cheerleading uniform or my school clothes? But now I understand that all the challenges, hard work, and obstacles that I encountered would be necessary to build strong character. I grew up in poverty. I had to work for everything. I started working at the age of 15 years old. I got pregnant at 18 and ended up being a single mom. I had to work nights to put myself through college while raising my infant son. All while I did pursue my degree in biology and had to defer my dreams of going to medical school because I had a lot of responsibility. And so as I began to work as a middle school teacher in East Oakland, I later found an opportunity to apply for the Oakland Police Department. Initially, I never thought I would be a cop. I remember going through the hiring process and was really intimidated because I didn't think I would be hired. I didn't think that the people who were police officers looked like me. I thought police officers were these big muscular men and not, like a petite woman such as myself. And additionally, my family didn't support me. They thought I would get hurt in Oakland or killed. And it was interesting because there was one person who supported me. He reached out to me. It was a family friend. And he said, "Drennan, it would be a great opportunity for you and your son if you worked at the Oakland Police Department." He convinced me to do it. He also had a friend that was an Oakland police officer, said he was a really good guy, and said, "Officers are good people. They're humans too." And so I went through the academy, and even after I completed 6.5 months of the academy and graduated at the top of my class, I still had reservations. But I knew as a single mother I had to continue going because I needed to support myself. I needed to support my son. And so again, my journey wasn't easy. I was met with a lot of different challenges, such as gender bias and discrimination. And it was because of those experiences that I vowed that if I ever became a leader and got into a position to affect change, I would do it. And even as a leader, it's been challenging to adapt to masculine leadership styles within a male-dominated organization and being accepted for my feminine leadership styles. But as a transformative leader, I not only embody the characteristics of a transformational leader, but also one who believes in social justice and diversity, self-awareness, having the moral courage to do what's right and do what's important. And the cherry on top is I did end up really loving this job. And so as you can see, 22 years later, I'm in a position as a role model, able to show others that look like me that they too can be a part of this profession and potentially serve as one of the highest ranking positions within this organization and even compete as the chief of police.
Thank you. Chief Pridgeon, as a police leader, how have you promoted accountability among those reporting directly to you and throughout the ranks? Again, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair Jackson. Well, first and foremost, I lead by example. So anybody that's been around me for any appreciable amount of time has heard me mention accountability and has heard me say, hold me accountable. So before I get to the common things that people think about when they think about accountability, let me talk about the positive aspects. So I always take opportunities to acknowledge and amplify the work that our employees do, whether that be through a formal ceremony of Employee of the Month or Sworn Officer of the Month, or even of the quarter. So as little as sending an email saying, I appreciate what you did, you have uplifted our agency and exemplified what we want to see modeled, great job. But to the other part of accountability, which I think truly transforms culture and improves organizations, I try to foster a culture of accountability and transparency, where there is a shared system of accountability throughout the entire organization. When I was in Fort Worth, I was responsible for helping develop and promulgate the honor code. The last stanza of that honor code reads, my integrity, character, and courage will be above reproach, and I will accept no less from other members of our department. Again, shared accountability at the peer level. In Seaside, we're about to embark on training called EPIC, Ethical Policing is Courageous, which teaches every officer how to hold their peers accountable so that we can create, again, a shared system of accountability. And when I mention accountability, it doesn't start and end at the line level or at the supervisory level. It's throughout the organization up to and including me. And in Fort Worth, I've had to hold deputy chiefs accountable. When I created an audit system in Fort Worth and Patrol, I went out to a briefing a couple of times and noticed that officers were not doing what we had agreed officers would do. So I had a conversation with that deputy chief, said things would change. Paid another visit, things had not changed. Well, I held him accountable by giving him a written counseling session. It never happened before in the history of the department. But that's how serious I am about accountability, because we can't say we believe in accountability, but it's only reserved for those at the officer or supervisory level. Every single person in the organization needs to be held accountable. The other part is they need to be holding their direct reports accountable. So there was one instance where this deputy chief told me that their manager did a poor job of counseling someone. But then when that deputy chief did the appraisal for the manager, that was not included. So what did I do? I marked that deputy chief down on her appraisal because that's how the system works. And I'm a true believer in accountability. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Chief Armstrong, what strategies have you implemented to build trust with minority youth in the community? You have 3 minutes.
I start off by saying this is one of the most important things that I consider as a part of my legacy. And one of the most critical things I've been involved in and that I've worked closely with is our OPD Youth Advisory Council. This was led by Brooklyn Williams. She brought a group of young people, representatives of young people across the city together twice a month to receive training and work together on creating recommendations for OPD to implement to improve relationships with youth and improve policies and practice. We're currently starting our 3rd year of the program last month. Some of the great ideas that the youth have brought forward have been including youth on hiring panels and establishing yearly youth conferences for all youth that I've implemented both of those recommendations. And it's interesting to see that we sometimes don't understand that youth is watching and that they have opinions that need to be heard. And so this committee, this advisory committee, allows us to have that opportunity. The Oakland Police Department is a diverse organization. It's 35% white, 28% Hispanic, and 16% African American. The issue of greatest concern to me as a chief of police is OPD is 85% male and 15% female. These numbers are significantly below, right at the national average, but not good for the Oakland Police Department. We can do better. We need to increase our number of female officers, specifically our African American females, focusing on recruiting at local colleges, strengthening our pipeline with Merritt College, increasing recruitment of police cadets within Oakland Unified School District and local universities. The mayor has been generous to provide funding and resources to double our cadet staff, but we haven't done that, and we haven't done that in a diverse way. And as chief, we would do better. I will start by saying there's no way you can address racial disparities or racial differences within an organization, within the community, without dealing with what's going on within the organization. And our department has taken on a racial disparity study that came out with findings that said African American officers have been treated differently than our white officers. But we immediately began to put forward strategies to make changes in the organization, putting together our race and equity teams and our racial equity steering committees, led by our Director of Race and Equity, Darlene Flynn, and Stanford professor, Dr. Jennifer Eberhardt. We expect that we will make recommendations within the department for policy, training, and standards that will change this dynamic. And we will be presenting both to the police commission and to the council the changes that this department has made to make this department a welcoming place for Oakland youth who see a future in the Oakland Police Department. Thank you.
Thank you. So now we're out of our unique question portion, back to everyone answers the same question, and we're reducing to 2 minutes. Please identify any effective interventions you have implemented to increase diversity and inclusion of minorities and women within your department. You have 2 minutes. I will start with Commander Lando, then go to Deputy Chief Lindsay, then to Chief Pridgeon, and finally to Deputy Chief Armstrong.
Thank you. So I think first and foremost, and I touched on it earlier, would be the implicit bias training that my team and I designed and implemented and rolled out to the entire department. We not only do we have to train our officers, but then we have to hold our officers and ourselves accountable when we don't act in accordance with our values. So for me, that's first and foremost the most important. There's 2 other things that I wanted to touch on, and one of them is that I currently serve on the Occupational Advisory Committee for what's called our Emergency Response Technology Program at one of our high schools in the district that I commanded. And that was a program designed to increase diversity in our ranks by basically providing young people an opportunity, young high school students, an opportunity to learn about public safety professions. If you turn on the TV right now, and you look at what's going on in policing, I don't know that I would even pick policing as a career anymore, just based on the, what's being portrayed out there in the media. So we really wanted young people to have a chance to see the positive sides of police. And it's also police, fire, and EMS. But any high school student in Pittsburgh now can take advantage of this program. I sit on the steering committee for it. And if they choose to be a part of the program, they get bused over to the high school in my district, what was my district, and for a few afternoons a week, they get to learn about police, fire, and EMS, some basics of each. And the idea is when they get out of high school, they'll now look at that as a potential career opportunity because they actually got to learn about that. And one of the other things I participate in is I'm the Bureau of Police's representative on our Disproportionate Minority Contact Committee, and I work on issues involving juvenile justice and how to keep young people out of the juvenile justice system. And I believe my time is up. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Chief Lindsay.
So there is a national challenge with the recruitment and hiring of women and minorities, particularly in law enforcement. And so just with the recent events and things that's happening nationwide, it does pose a lot more challenges for our organization to attract people to our department, especially for diverse groups. And so I've worked independently and with other groups such as minority organizations like the OBOA and Noble, the local colleges. I'm also been a professor at Merritt College for over 5 years. We're in partnership with the local high schools. We do teach there and do a lot of events with them. And so because of my relationships with the local colleges and the high schools, I've been able to leverage that and be able to continue to strengthen our pipeline program, being responsible for the hiring of a lot of our police cadets, our police officers, strengthening our Police Explorer program, which starts at the age of 13, facilitating and participating in the annual Administration of Justice Symposium at Merritt College, where we host hundreds of students from the high schools and local colleges, bringing our background and recruiting unit out there to recruit, bringing some of the younger officers so that this younger people can see them and interact with them and see that it's not such a bad profession and that they can build rapport and maybe get a mentor there too. I've also, being the captain of training and personnel at a time, saw significant results increasing women and minorities in our hiring process and successfully graduating them from our police academy and our field training program. So overall, I will just end on this. Diversity and inclusion happens by intentional design and not by accident. The hiring and retention of a diverse workforce requires intentionality, and the appointment of the right leaders, support and partnership with our stakeholders, and overall holding people accountable for doing what we say we need them to do.
Thank you very much. Chief Pridgeon.
Thank you, Chair Jackson. I'll start back in Fort Worth. So when I took over the training division, I did a comprehensive analysis of what needed to be done, increased funding for the recruiting process, and changed the recruitment video. It had traditionally had people in tactical gear with AR-15s, changed it to a video that had officers smiling and interacting with the community because that's what we wanted to attract. We started going to HBCUs and HSIs and making connections there and developing relationships over years. For the first time in the history of that police department, we held a test at John Jay College in New York, which is the preeminent school for criminal justice in the country and a very diverse school. As a result of those initiatives, we were able to increase diversity in the next academy class by 80% and had more women in that class than we probably had in 2 decades. As far as internally, I changed the the process for specialized assignments to a more objective process. And as a result, the first female mounted patrol sergeant in the history of the department was appointed under my leadership, as well as the first Black sergeant of sex crimes under my leadership. In Seaside, we have intentionally tried to work with behavioral scientists to de-bias the hiring process. We started with language because there's certain language that you can use that literally attracts African Americans, women, and other minorities. So we introduced that into our verbiage for our recruiting campaign. We increased the number of females on the department by 50%, and I appointed the first female deputy chief in the history of the Seaside Police Department. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, DC Armstrong.
Yes, during this critical moment in time in this country when law enforcement is having a challenge with recruiting anyone, I will say that for us in the city of Oakland to improve our hiring, particularly of local candidates, we have to begin to work strongly in our schools, starting with our middle schools, because even high school, young people have developed a negative attitude towards law enforcement that we need to work on. But that recruitment really comes down to our ability to get into schools and have conversations with young people. So what I did when I was the Oakland Youth and School Supervisor Commander working in schools is I took away the idea of having school resource officers and renamed those officers our youth outreach officers, really taking away the stigma that they are there to enforce the law, but instead there to support young students being able to thrive in a safe environment. And that's the strategy that I think it takes to re-engineer this perspective that people have about law enforcement. I also partnered with Black Organizing Project as the commander to create policies that restricted officers from arresting juveniles on campus. Also, had a policy that required officers to not question juveniles without a parent being present. All of these things improve the way families and communities view law enforcement in their community. The other thing that I did in the Oakland Police Department is start our first ever youth internship program, which is a paid internship that happens during the summer, where all students are offered the opportunity to work inside the Oakland Police Department for the entire summer and get exposed to not only police officers, but our dispatchers, our crime lab technicians and scientists, and our evidence technicians, to see that there's more to law enforcement than just being a police officer, that the professional staff at our department help our department move forward every day, and they don't get the appreciation that they deserve. And so this program helps bring them into the community's forefront. Thank you.
Thank you. Briefly discuss your role in working to implement the concepts and recommendations of 21st century policing as outlined in the President's Task Force report. You have 2 minutes, and this time I'll start with Deputy Chief Lindsay, then to Chief Pridgeon, then to Deputy Chief Armstrong, and finally to Commander Lando. DC Lindsay?
Thank you. So there are the 6 pillars associated with the 21st century policing. You have the officer safety and wellness, technologies and social media, building trust and legitimacy, which also is procedural justice, policy and oversight, accountability, training and education of officers, community policing, and crime reduction. So in light of 2 minutes, I would not do justice if I'm able to talk about all of them. So I'm going to focus on building trust and legitimacy. As the leader of this organization, I will ensure that we continue to open our doors to outside ideas and input. There were recent complaints of racial disparities within the Oakland Police Department from the OBOA, which you heard Deputy Chief Armstrong speak about earlier. And so one of the things that's really important is if you don't have internal procedural justice, then it does affect the way that our officers and our professional staff treat the community. And so because of this study, we have not only accepted all of the 15 recommendations and began to implement them, which I am the project manager in charge of, but we're also establishing ways to implement these 15 recommendations and find a way to measure them and measure their effectiveness as to make sure that they're actually working. And this work is being done in partnership with the Stanford researchers. So one of the things that we want to focus on with building trust and legitimacy is just being able to change the hearts and minds of others so that we can be able to accomplish the goals that we need to accomplish. And so it's important for me and our organization that our officers feel like they're being treated procedurally just. It's important for me as a leader, if I'm going to ask them to go out and do things for the community, that they not only feel that if they're being disciplined, which is one of the focuses of the disparity report, that they're all being treated with equity, there's consistency and discipline. And if they have a negative perception, which was 86% of the staff who had a negative perception of how they're treated in the process, we need to do something to change that. And that will help.
Thank you very much. Chief Pridgeon?
Thank you. Well, serving as the national initiative to building community trust and justice, I understood the importance of the final task force report. So I implemented the tenets of the report into the training curriculum for new employees, also put it on promotional exams, trained all employees, approximately 15 to 1,600 in de-escalation, implemented the police training officer program, which relies on problem solving instead of the old FTO, which was checking the boxes to make sure you had certain types of calls. Increased transparency by sending out executive staff minutes. Traditionally, meetings between the chief, assistant chief, and deputy chief would just stay within that room. I had those minutes promulgated to everybody in the agency so they could be aware of what was happening. Also put the agency's general orders online. Now, I know that's commonplace here in California. It did not exist in Texas when I did it. Created a matrix in Seaside where every single employee has training that is recommended for them to go to. And that means leadership training at the officer level, because oftentimes officers are overlooked and not provided that level of training. That's one of the things that's on there, as well as sending our executives to the Harvard Kennedy School senior executive and state and local government, which had never happened before in the history of the department. Implemented a wellness app for every employee. From their phone, they could access, if they needed counseling, if they needed financial help or whatever it is, an app for that. Also, community engagement I have taken to extraordinary heights, culminating in what we are really proud of, and it's the snack van. Excuse the spelling, but it's Seaside Nutrition, Academics, and Athletics for Cops and Kids. It's a van where officers drive through neighborhoods and hand out free healthy snacks, school supplies, and sports equipment. Thank you.
Thank you. DC Armstrong?
Yes, I'll start off with building trust and legitimacy. Now, I haven't said anything, but the Procedural Justice Program for the Oakland Police Department is a nationally recognized procedural justice program, and I'm the lead instructor. It was given an award by hopefully our soon-to-be Vice President, Kamala Harris, as one of the top procedural justice programs in the state of California, and it became the model for every law enforcement agency in the state of California to take. We've completed Procedural Justice 1, Procedural Justice 2, and now we're currently moving into Procedural Justice 3, which no other department in the country has taken on yet. We've also had implicit bias trained by Stanford, as well as increased the number of trainings that we provided both to our professional staff as well, not ending with just the sworn staff. In terms of police oversight, I think you've heard we have the most powerful police commission in the country. And we've worked diligently with our police commission to create progressive policies in collaboration and in partnership. Leading the department's nationally recognized procedural justice program is not enough. We have to create new and innovative ways to touch our staff. And so what we've done is really focused in on the education side, and our training division has moved to an adult learning module concept. We've also created a learning module where officers can now select courses so that they can continue their training. And then lastly, I'd like to say our officer wellness program, which we have been recognized by IACP as one of the leading departments in the country on trauma-informed care and vicarious trauma, led by one of our professional staff, Barbara DeSalvo. We recently received a grant of over $700,000 to continue that program because of the success that we've had. So the Oakland Police Department has been committed to implementing all aspects of the 21st century policing task force recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you. Commander Lando.
Thank you. So Pittsburgh was one of 6 cities that was selected in the National Initiative for Building Community Trust and Justice. And I know I touched on it earlier, but I was one of the Pittsburgh police commanders that was tasked with creating the training program that we have. But there were several other parts of that I played a role in. And I just wanted to touch on a few of them quickly. In addition to being one of the founding members of the Procedural Justice Unit, we implemented a model of internal procedural justice within our station so we could hold officers accountable when they engaged in misconduct, but do it in a way that didn't destroy their morale. I think that's really important. A lot of times, officers are human. They're going to make mistakes, and it's important that we hold them accountable when they make mistakes, but there's a way to do it. Just like external procedural justice, we hold the community accountable when they break the law. We have to hold our officers accountable as well, but we don't want to do it in a way that's going to shut them down and they're no longer productive as officers. So we implemented a model of internal procedural justice. I oversaw the implementation of our body-worn camera program and our Narcan initiative at the Zone 5 police station. Both of those things increase trust in the police, and also with the body-worn cameras increase our transparency. We developed a robust social media presence so we could reach those individuals that sometimes didn't attend community meetings, but we still needed to reach out to them. And I was one of several officers that developed a coaching, counseling, and mentoring program for all of our police officers and supervisors. And lastly, we brought leadership training to the whole department at all ranks, and I think that's really important. It helps officers make better decisions. And again, I'm getting the wrap up. So those are just some of the things I implemented. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please tell us about the diversity in your department and city and provide strategies you have implemented to reduce racial disparities in policing in your jurisdictions. You each have 2 minutes, and I'll start with Chief Pridgeon, then go to Deputy Chief Armstrong, Commander Lando, and finally to Deputy Chief Lindsay. Chief Pridgeon?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'll have to go back to Fort Worth because, quite frankly, I'm the chief in Seaside, and that's not going to happen in my department. But when I was in Fort Worth, the racial makeup was a little bit different. There were only 10% Black on the department and less in the community. And so I audited the hiring process to determine where those inefficiencies were occurring. And it turns out it had to do with people's subjective opinions about whether or not somebody should be a cop. So I got everyone trained and then held them accountable if they did not meet that standard. There was a special investigations unit that would investigate criminal offenses by police officers. It just so happened that they always investigated African Americans for allegedly stealing time, which means they could have been working or supposed to be at work, but somewhere else doing something. I couldn't change the process, but I put on enough pressure to where they started warning people the first time before they implemented criminal charges. I prohibited criminal histories from being released to the public related to an officer-involved incident. Historically, that stuff had been released and, sort of to demonize the person that was involved in the incident. I stopped that from happening. Also, there was, in Texas, you can arrest someone who resists you even if they don't know they're being arrested. So I implemented a policy where the officer had to tell the person that they were being arrested to reduce the number of charges against people for resisting arrest. And finally, I guess I'll end with this. Ultimately, it's about community harm reduction and using the criminal justice system as a last resort. And that's what I have done in Seaside. And I just want to reiterate, we have reduced arrests by 18%, use of force by 30%, and violent crime by 14%. Thank you.
Thank you. DC Armstrong?
Yes, I spoke earlier about the diversity of our department. I'm going to focus now on the reducing racial disparities in policing. Since 2016, I've led the OPD Stop Data Collection Program, which has been recognized nationally for the OPD's implementation of precision-based policing and intelligence-led policing, which has led to the reduction of the number of stops by 38,000 since 2015, led to a reduction of over 60% over a 3-year period. In 2015, the Oakland Police Department made 38,000 stops. And in 2019, we reduced that to 14,600 stops. It really shows the focus and intentionality and the focus on not causing harm to our community. Our African American stops were reduced by over 60% during that same time period. We've also been able to reduce our racial disparities by 11% over the last 3 years. The department is considered a leader in stop data collection, and I've been personally called to testify before the state of California's RIPA board on our stop data practices. I also co-lead the department's implementation of risk management with Assistant Chief Allison, which examines officers' performance to determine at-risk behavior and potential racial bias. I work closely with Stanford professors to create this risk management program that allows the department to thoroughly examine all traffic stops, use of force, citizen complaints, and overall performance. We use these stop data slides to create our new slalom dashboard, which is created by our Director of Technology, Andrew P. Peterson. We are preparing now to move forward with a visible stop data slalom dashboard that you'll see to increase transparency. Thank you.
I'm sorry, Commander Lando and then Deputy Chief Lindsay.
Thank you. So in comparing a population, Pittsburgh and Oakland actually have almost identical African-American population. Our police department in Pittsburgh, though, is 12% African-American, while our population in the city is 23%. So again, I hate to, belabor the point. I know I've touched on it before, but I think the implicit bias training, the procedural justice training goes a long way towards improving diversity. The youth programming that we've done, like I said, had tremendous results in relationship building. And I think it's really important that we talk about how we police, right? I think we've gotten ourselves into some trouble by over-policing neighborhoods. We see that there's an uptick in crime in a neighborhood. So what do we traditionally do? We say, go to this neighborhood and, basically, our intentions are honorable, right? We want to get guns off the street. We want to make neighborhoods safer. But I think a lot of times, particularly in communities of color, we over-police because, we in our effort to do the right thing, we're really stopping, sometimes searching and arresting people that don't need to be arrested. So I really focus on intelligence-led policing and make sure that the people we're going after are really the drivers of violence in the community. And so we want to do that precision policing and not over-policing communities. And then lastly, I just want to touch on accountability. I think it's so important, like I talked about earlier, is that when officers do act outside of our values and they do police with a biased mindset or racist mindset, that we hold them accountable. And until we do that, we're not going to win the trust of the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Chief Lindsay?
Yeah, so the demographics of OPD is pretty diverse, but we still have some work to do when it comes to the hiring of more women, which we're at about 11 to 12%, which is about 2% less than the national average. And so it is important to continue to hire and recruit those minorities and women so we can get them to be a part of our department, hire people from the community so that they can also help to be a part of this department and continue to build the type of trust and legitimacy that we need in this city and within this organization. And so some of the things that I've done around recruitment and hiring to reduce racial disparities, some of it was done when I was the captain of personnel and training, where I put in structural solutions comparable to what Chief Pridgen mentioned, where you do audits, where you look at what areas of subjectivity. And now with some of the work that I'm doing on the racial disparities studies centered around the recruitment and hiring, we are creating what they call structural solutions. And the structural solutions are designed where you create policies and procedures that are designed to mitigate areas ripe for potential biases. Then also, when you look at reducing the footprint in the community, using the intelligence-led policing model is very important. I've used it before because it's so important that we don't allow officers just to ride around and hunt what they call just looking for a felony. They need to be very intentional. They need to be directed. And we also need to hold our supervisors and commanders accountable for how they direct and guide officers' behaviors on the street. We don't need to be overly heavy-handed, but we do need to educate our officers on how to be better crime fighters, how to be very intentional in staying on their beats, understanding where the crime problems are on their beats, and addressing those problems and giving them little room just to hunt around and drive around and stopping people randomly because they want to take someone to jail. Thank you.
Thank you. As my final question to you, I'll ask you to tell us why the mayor should select you to serve as the next chief of police for the city of Oakland. In other words, why you and why now? She's listening. You have 2 minutes to respond. I'll start with you, Deputy Chief Armstrong, then go to Commander Lando, then to Deputy Chief Lindsay, and then to Chief Pridgen.
All right, first I'd like to thank the Police Commission and Selection Committee for their hard work and dedication to this fair and open process. I'd also like to thank all the finalists for their competitiveness in this process. I believe the mayor should select me because I've worked my entire law enforcement career for this moment. I've remained committed to the city of Oakland and worked my butt off to increase trust in the community. I've been asked by many recruiters to apply for other police chief positions in local cities and cities across the country, and I've always said no. Oakland is the only chief of police position I've ever applied for. My commitment has always been to Oakland, and if I'm going to lead a department, I want it to be Oakland. I joined law enforcement because I wanted to make a change in the city I was born in, bred in, raised in, and my values were born in. I'm what you call turnkey ready. I have the knowledge, experience, and clear vision for the future of the Oakland Police Department. Through the hard work of the OPD executive staff, the men and women of the department, the police commission, and the department is on track to finally reach NSA compliance. I have been a leader for our ceasefire strategy and a proven crime reduction strategy that has led to 5 years of consistent decreases in crime. It's been validated by academic researchers. I'm currently leading the department's PJT training, stop data collection, and risk management. I chose to lead this initiative because these are the core values I brought to policing that speak to the reason I joined this department. From across the country, they see the way these OPD programs work, and they've come to witness us doing this work. I'm rooted in Oakland through and through. I love this city, and it would be an honor to lead this department into the future. But this isn't just about LaRon. This is about every African-American boy and girl from a marginalized community in Oakland like me who aspire to make change in their own community. We walk by faith and not by sight. I didn't imagine I'd ever be in this position, but I'm encouraging each one of you to be the change you want to see. Thank you, and I'm truly grateful for your consideration.
Thank you. And next is Commander Lando.
Thank you. I wanted to be a police officer my entire life. My mother still reminds me of when I used to chase my little brother around the house and handcuff him to things. And she said, I knew from the time you were a little kid, this is what you were going to do. But it's been my dream. I've had an amazing 21 year career with the Pittsburgh Police. Have nothing bad to say about it, but I'm ready for the next step. At 20 years, I'm still extremely passionate about the profession of policing and about ethical leadership. For me, there's just nothing more important than being ethical and leading by example. I've had the chance to do that in Pittsburgh, and I want to take some of the philosophies and some of the initiatives and programs that we were able to develop and go to another agency where I could be the chief of police and implement them and help improve things in another city. Like I talked about throughout the interview, I've had the chance to develop several unique programs that led to reductions in complaints against officers, reduction in crime, and improved trust between police and community members. That's what drives me every day. That's what I'm passionate about. I could very easily stay in my current role, make a decent salary and have a fairly low stress. But why would I want to take on something like Oakland? Because I believe I'm the right person for the job. My heart's in the right place. I'm genuine, and I do what I say I'm going to do. And I think that's really important in policing. So I'll just leave you with this. I think my qualities as being a uniter, bringing police and community together, is something that Oakland could benefit greatly from. And I would be honored to have that opportunity so thank you. Thanks to the commission, to the mayor, and to everyone that took their time tonight to listen to all of us. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Deputy Chief Lindsay.
First of all, I would like to say thank you to all of you for allowing me to be a part of this process. I'm very humbled for the opportunity, very appreciative for the opportunity. And so I want to say thank you for having a fair process. I am committed to this city and to this organization. I love this city. I love this department, good or bad. I've been in the trenches for over 22 years. And, I continue to fight and want to support the members of this department, the professional staff, the people in the community. I continue to teach at Merritt College. And although some may say I would be stressed, I feel like I'm stretched because of my commitment to serve and to help and to bridge those gaps. I feel like it's needed. I'm needed, and I'm what's needed for this department at this time. There's not a lot of women that make it this far within the Oakland Police Department. I'm the first internal female candidate to compete for this job, so that would be history to have a female internal candidate take on the honor of being the department's top cop. But not only just to talk about a gender or race or anything like that, but I feel like I have the competency and the experience to do this job. I'm continuing to grow as a leader. This department, we need to continue to grow this department. For future leaders, we need to ensure that we have a succession plan so that the next generation will be able to continue to compete for this opportunity as well. And so because of my background and my lifelong ties to education and being an educator and being a learner, I feel like I'm at the right place at the right time to help this department grow and help us begin to develop and mentor and prepare the next future leaders within our organization. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, to you, Chief Pridgeon.
Thank you, Chair. The mayors should select me to be the next police chief because I want to live in Oakland and the commute from Seaside would be a beast. No, seriously, 2 reasons. One, I am a principled leader, one who is willing to risk position and privilege to promote ethical, accountable policing and to ensure everyone is treated equitably, fairly, and justly. When I looked at the advertisement for this position, a couple of things struck me. One, it was comprehensive, it was formidable, it was all-encompassing, but it needs to be, given where the Oakland Police Department has been and where it must go. Every single thing listed is what I have done and continue to do as a police leader. I have been implementing reformative and sustainable change for nearly 2 decades. Before citizens took to the streets demanding it, before reimagining policing became a favorable platform to endorse or adopt. If given the opportunity to lead the Oakland Police Department, not only will we complete the negotiated settlement agreement, but we will outperform it. And we will improve trust and transform the culture in the process. The Oakland Police Department will be a progressive policing model for the country, if not the world, to follow. And I really sincerely hope that you will honor me with the privilege of serving as your next police chief. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I want to thank these outstanding candidates, my fellow ad hoc committee members, Commissioners Dorado, Harbin Forte, and Prather, worked hard to pull this group together. I think that you will agree that these are 4 outstanding candidates, and I'm glad I'm not the mayor, since she will need to make the decisions. Again, I want to thank the mayor for co-chairing this forum with us. I want to thank the community for listening in. And I want to underscore that all comments should be submitted to the mayor's office. Endorsements, questions, concerns. That ends our forum 2 whole minutes early. And we just want to say, let us pray for the city of Oakland and pray for the country. If people want to send messages to the mayor, it's Office of the Mayor at oaklandca.gov. Office of the Mayor at oaklandca.gov. Again, thank you for your time tonight. It was my joy to host you, and we're just so proud of all of the candidates. Oakland deserves the best.